Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Indie Art Today. I'm Anthony Piccioni, and thank you for joining us for episode 44 of this podcast. If you don't already know, based on last week's panel or on this current video panel, if you're watching it live on YouTube, we're doing something a bit different over the next 3 weeks. We are going to be doing video panels where we're talking to different artists in live theater about this new era we're living in as this pandemic hopefully comes to an end in the coming months, and as vaccines are getting distributed and as theaters finally start to reopen. We have a lot of questions that are still kind of open-ended for us in the industry, whether it's how much will restrictions continue to impact us, what kind of shows will be produced, and what will happen to the new artistic medium that is virtual theater. So today we are going to be talking to 5 theater directors, and next week we'll also be talking to a group of actors. And this past week we talked to a group of playwrights, I should know, and that video is still on YouTube. So after this, please feel free to go and watch that too as well. But for now, I would like our directors who are here today to please turn on their videos if they can. There they are.
Hey there.
Hello. So,
Hello.
Thank you everyone for being here. Before we get started with the conversation, I was hoping that all of you could please introduce yourselves. So, Sarah, if it's okay with you, would you be willing to go first?
Absolutely. My name is Sara Fellini. I'm the artistic director of Spit and Vigor Theater Co.
Cool. Laura?
I'm Laura Caparrotti. I'm the artistic director of Kairos Italy Theater, the Italian theater company in New York, and in Scena Italian Theater Festival New York. The Italian Theater Festival goes in all 5 boroughs of New York City.
Ralph?
Hey, I'm Ralph Lewis. I'm one of the 3 directors that make up Peculiar Works Project. My pronouns are he, him. I'm coming to you from the Bowery, which is the land of the Lenape.
Dev?
Hey, I'm Dev Janki. I'm the artistic director of Live and in Color. We're based both in New York and Connecticut. We develop new plays and musicals. And I'm calling from New York. Happy to be with you all.
And finally, Dennis.
Hi, I'm Dennis Coris. I'm the artistic director of the Fresh Fruit Festival, which is a queer arts festival in New York. And I'm also the director of new works at Live and in Color, where Dev is the artistic director.
And I think we have a very good group of guests today. This is exactly what I was hoping for in terms of the directors panel, people who are really active in independent theater and not just directing, but producing some really great work, some of which I've had the chance to see prior to this pandemic. And for those of you who I haven't seen your work yet, I promise to do so as soon as this back live again. So Laura, I see you nodding your head. Yes, you are absolutely on that list. Okay, but for now, let's get to the topic. I do want to start by just talking about reopening plans. So as you all know, like April 2nd was when the green light was given for theaters to reopen here in New York. We're currently at 33% capacity. Last I checked, I think it's going to go up to 100% by September. I'm curious to know, like, what you guys all think of this. Like, do you think we're going too fast? Do you think it's about right? Like, how do you guys feel about this reopening plan? Like, I imagine there's a lot of excitement for all of us, but I'm wondering what's going through all your thoughts, and whoever wants to jump in, go ahead.
We're very excited at Spit and Vigor. We have a plan for our off-Broadway debut in July, actually. So
Oh, wow.
We're planning that, yeah, which is pretty exciting. We're going to be at the Players Theater. It's been, you have to be very careful with rehearsing and with really planning the reopening. Right now it's at 33%. I think it's gonna, they just implemented a new rule that now it's gonna go to, like you have to maintain 6-foot distance, but you can, have more capacity depending on, the ability of your space. So it's a lot to think about, but I think, live theater is it's a very different beast from what we've been doing for the last year. And I think we've all really desperately missed it. And so we're very happy.
Mind me asking, like, by the way, Sarah, like how much planning did you do before the reopening in terms of like the off-Broadway debut that you mentioned? Like, was this planned before the pandemic and then you're finally getting to do it, or?
Well, we actually were supposed to open our right as the quarantine closed in on us all.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, we had a residency with the Players Theater. So that was postponed, and we actually still have that residency. And then because we have spent the year kind of plotting and preparing, we had several productions that were ready to go up. We have a really tight-knit group of performers and designers and everybody who could kind of plan while we were doing other things. I mean, we did a really cool one-shot kind of live film in the center at West Park in November. It was socially distanced. It was just like a series of monologues that were interconnected by one plot, so everybody could be isolated, and we walked through the beautiful church at the center of West Park, so it was a beautiful backdrop. So we had things going on during the pandemic, but it's not the same. And so while we're doing that, we were all just kind of plotting and planning. So we were prepared. We did have, we were kind of ready for this kind of opening.
What about you guys? Do any of you have any similar plans that you've been making in terms of live theater coming back?
Well, for the Fresh Fruit Festival, we usually do our main stage festival in the summer. Right. And even though technically we would be able to do that now with things opening, the problem is that it takes so much lead time to prepare for the festival in terms of selecting the shows, getting them signed on, and then rehearsal time for the shows, et cetera, that we aren't going to be able to do it this year because we would have had to have committed to it back in February or March. And at that time, we didn't have enough information.
They were like back and forth over when things will reopen, right?
Right. So for our main stage festival, we're not going to be doing that until summer of 2022. So because of the planning time required, it's actually has to be pushed back still. So we're still doing a bunch of virtual stuff. We have virtual offerings planned throughout the rest of the year, even.
Yeah, I mean, I did want to talk more about like virtual theater and the future of that a bit later. But for our three other panelists, was there anything that you guys have to share, like whether you have a project coming up or something that's delayed?
I think at Live and in Color, I think we're super excited to be back in person because we primarily do musicals. So it's been very tricky trying to develop new musicals virtual without pre-recording stuff. But I think we're all cautiously optimistic. I think just for safety, we have tried to plan things as late as possible and push things as late as possible, hoping that as things progress, things open up. It's an interesting time, and I think theaters have been dealing with this last year as well because it sort of is fundraising time, right? For how you do that, like what kind of events can happen, whether we can do a in-person gala or not. So we're sort of dealing with that right now, but that will get us to actually in-person productions. But it's a daily reprieve. Every day we're like trying to say, okay, what are the options? And we sort of have to remain flexible, even though it seems like we're headed in the right direction. But I'm definitely excited.
And you said you're based in both New York and Connecticut. You said you're company?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because Connecticut is completely open right now. So I think we have a few more options there. But even with things being open, the question is, how are people going to feel emotionally and psychologically coming to the space? I think there still is, even though the CDC says one thing, I think just trying to make people feel comfortable is going to be a big issue moving forward.
Yeah, that's a good point, because something that I've been thinking about a lot is people have been raising the possibility of, quote, vaccine passports, which I personally support, because I think if everyone is vaccinated, both the artists and the audiences, then I think that drastically reduces any COVID risk that there might be from going to see live theater. I'm curious to know, like, I mean, how do you guys feel about that? Like, is it feasible? And like, do you think that should be the right way to go in terms of reopening? Like,
I have to say that I've been talking with different colleagues who runs theaters, and some of them they said only vaccinated people, so kind of a passport, right? A pass or whatever you want to call it. And others told me, I am not sure. I feel like I don't want to have just vaccinated people because I feel like I want to welcome everyone that has a negative test. So I'm talking with different, artistic directors that have theaters, not just companies, but really they run theaters. There are mixed feelings about it. So I wonder what is going to happen. I see that on Facebook or on Twitter or other social media, there are these questions. So if there's a 100% capacity, are you coming to the theater? Do you want to wear masks? So there is like, it's a very uncharted territory right now, and everyone is trying to get the feeling. Last night I went to see Downtown Live, the festival downtown that has been produced by the Tank and Guard Arts and the Downtown Alliance. And there were people, of course, it's a socially distancing, even though it's outdoor, but there was an audience, and there was also an excitement. You could see not only the performers, but also the audience, like, we are in the audience, we are watching a show. So I think it's going to take time and adjustments, especially because each state has different rules. People feel in so many different ways. But I think slowly, and I'm with Dev in this, like it's going to happen, and there are going to be adjustments, and maybe some people they are not going to go in an indoor place for a long time, maybe, and maybe some they will say, oh no, I am vaccinated, I'm fine, and I want to go. It's really at this point I find a big question mark. And to finish with what we are planning is, I'm echoing everyone in saying 2020 was our 20th anniversary. So you just imagine what we had planned for 2020. We had 4 production. The festival was bigger than ever. And I finish here. So we have the 4 production waiting, and also we have but the 4 production are going to become reality in 2022. I don't want to do anything before. The festival, as Dennis was saying, we were about to open the festival. The festival was in May, so we were ready. And we go in all 5 boroughs, so we have a big organization. And also we have international artists, which is one more problem right now, because international is difficult. So 2022, and Dennis, I hope so, because I hope so. And personally, we did some online theater. We are doing online meetings, like I'm starting an online series on translation and subtitles for live performances. Some kind of historical talk, more like something that can stay online and doesn't have to go away when we go back. And we have to commission work for the fall, but we don't know if it's going to be online, if it's going to be on stage, if it's going to be half and half.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why I'm bringing up the topic of reopening and like vaccine passports and everything. Because I have nothing against virtual theater. I myself have done my share of virtual projects during this time, but you know, it's interesting because, like, yeah, you do want to welcome everyone, as you were saying, Laura, but at the same time, we want people to be safe and we want people to give them a reason to get vaccinated because a lot of people are hesitant, right?
Yeah,
like for crazy reasons, maybe not reasons in a few cases.
I
But
can add one
go
thing.
ahead.
I'm in residence at Casa Italiana at NYU.
Mm-hmm.
NYU has its own rule that are completely different from theaters, from Broadway. So I'm not only personally, of course, it's rehearsal, is for showing. We don't do shows there, but you know, some commission work comes from there. And so we are dealing not only with the city, the CDC, whatever rules, but also with internal rules at NYU. And, you know, each theater, this is why I was saying artistic directors before, each theater is going also to go to choose what to do. And it's going to be interesting, but also for us companies, we have to be very flexible in understanding where we are going and who we are talking to, and, you know, and adjust.
Yeah. Ralph, we haven't heard from you yet. What's going through your mind as we're discussing all this?
You know, I find myself thinking a lot about roaches. You know, if you've ever lived in like a Lower East Side tenement and you walk into the kitchen late at night and flip on the light and you just see the roaches all scatter in different directions, I sort of feel like that's what happened with COVID, that once it hit, we all scurried and we all went into different places. And, you know, gosh, this could be one of the greatest opportunities for a lot of people, at least in the indie theater world. You know, some went into podcasting, some went into Zoom shows. You know, I shot my first film and it's already been chosen for 6 festivals. We actually, before it got cold, we did a live promenade performance outdoors at the end of October. So, you know, Peculiar Works has been busy throughout this entire time. And, you know, we're all going to sort of creep back into the kitchen at sort of different paces. I mean, I feel Broadway, you know, they can open to 100%, but until 100% of the audience feels comfortable going back into those theaters, they're not going to be able to run because they're based on turning a profit. You know, investors don't do Broadway for the artistic value. They want their money back and more. But I do think for indie theater, my company is site specific. So we're accustomed to performing outdoors or in open spaces or in big vaults or whatever. And I feel like the not-for-profits, because we are going to get some of this recovery funding, that I think maybe the not-for-profits and the small theaters are going to have more of an opportunity to do all sorts of things, some live and in person, some live and remote, some not live at all. So I'm excited about this time.
I should also add, like, in terms of Broadway, like, they rely a lot on tourism, and that's been something that's been majorly affected by COVID and all. I want to ask you specifically, Ralph, because you do a lot of work in site-specific theater. Like, how much work have you been able to still do during this pandemic, like, in terms of outdoor work and such? Like, has that been something you've been able to make work by any chance?
Yeah, I mean, the piece we did in October, it was a promenade piece for a benefit for Dixon Place down here in the East Village. And we had artists stationed in and around the 3 different locations that Dixon Place has called home over the past 30 years, and different performances. Some of it was action painting, some of it was singing, some of it was acting, some of it was dance, and the audience just sort of moved in pods from piece to piece to piece. And I think, you know, we have plans for a piece this summer of a Diane DePrima piece, a poet who passed away during COVID, that we'd also like to do in a promenade. But we're also in pre-production for our second film. We did a Zoom piece for the Municipal Arts Society's Jane's Walk last week, and I'm doing a piece called Behind the Curtain as a benefit for the Episcopal Actors Guild on the 20th. So, like I said, we're as busy as we've ever been.
Yeah, that's very great. Speaking of busy, like, I do want to just pivot a bit because a lot of you have talked about the virtual projects you've been working on. I think we're all in agreement that nothing will ever fully replace live theater, but I don't think virtual theater is necessarily going away even when the pandemic goes away. So I'm curious to know, A, how much do you think virtual theater will continue to play a role alongside live theater in the projects that you choose to work on? And B, putting aside your own feelings about it, like how much virtual theater will we still be seeing like once COVID is a thing of the past? So whoever wants to go first on this, like
you mean virtual theater,
like Zoom theater
and,
or whatever,
but also streaming performances?
Oh, well, that was another thing I wanted to bring up, like live streaming, live productions, because like that could be a whole revenue booster. Like, but I wanted to talk specifically about like Zoom theater because I did want to talk about live streaming later because that's obviously a whole different thing. But
well, I'll say I definitely think everyone right now is having Zoom exhaustion. I know, it's for all of us. It's even hard to, it's just hard to look at the screen after a year and a half. But I do think we've just really discovered a lot of value in it. I don't know how much actual full performances will be done on Zoom because, I mean, I'll talk about that in a second, but I do think, for example, rehearsals and meetings and auditions, this medium has really shown us that you can get a lot of work done with a lot less money, spent. So I think, for example, in my mind, I don't think there will ever be an open call for a big Broadway show again because you can see massive amounts of people and then bring them in for the callbacks in person. So that's one thing I think that will potentially stay. But just backtracking, I think I personally went into the pandemic completely resistant to any kind of virtual theater. To me, it seemed like two different things, two different words that didn't go together. And thank God I had people like Dennis and some wonderful young people on our team who were like, no, we can do this. We can create some theater online. And I'm really proud that over the course of the year and a half, our whole mission is new work and lifting up new artists. We were able to commission close to 70 artists to write specific Zoom theater, as you said, like new work that is designed for these medium for these boxes. So it ended up being a really creative time, and we were able to reach people we never were able to reach before, work with artists we would never have been able to work with. So that element of it was really, really exciting. Maybe Dennis, you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's the definition of what is virtual theater, like, comes into the whole conversation. Like, I have no interest in like theater, like plays that were written for the stage being done on Zoom. I tried it a few times in the pandemic and did not like doing it, and have not liked watching it. So I will be happy if that goes away and never comes back. But I do think that there are some things that will stay. One is logistical things, like Deb said, in terms of meetings, table reads, like just reading a new script to hear it out loud. A lot of that stuff has been very effective over Zoom, and I think that will stay. I also think that all theater companies have found other things, other storytelling mediums to engage in other than staged theater. Like the Fresh Fruit Festival, we've started doing radio plays, and that has been a blast. And I directed one of them, and I had never directed a radio play before and loved doing it and would like to do it again and more. Where that is specifically made for the medium of audio. So yeah, it's not trying to do the best that we can to make something interesting without everything that's supposed to be a part of it, but it's making something that was specifically audio only. And I think that's the same like with Live and in Color, some of the things we've been able to do with the commissions that Dev was talking about, where we weren't taking scripts that were meant for the stage and trying to do the best that we can in a Zoom box, but we were telling stories that were written specifically to be done over Zoom. So then it's, using the medium, like Ralph, it's like the site specific stuff where our site is Zoom. We're actually creating something from the ground up for Zoom.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, Dennis, like in terms of the audio drama, because when I think of like Zoom theater, I think of it as almost like doing radio plays, but with the video component added to it, right? Because like, you know, and like I am thinking like audio dramas somehow managed to persist all this time, even after like radio sort of been replaced by television and such. So it's interesting. That's what makes me think it's going to evolve. Like, I don't know, like I don't know what you guys think, but like in terms of like Dev, I think you were mentioning like performances, like it would be hard to do fully staged performances on Zoom. I'm curious to know, like, if it were specifically, as Dennis was saying, like for something specifically meant for this, like, could that be different?
Well, definitely. I mean, exactly what he said. Like I mean, all our shows were conversations that either happened over FaceTime or Instagram Live or Zoom, or, you know, so everything was designed in that vein. What we do specifically is a lot of musical theater. So that's where it gets tricky and then it gets the question of, is it live or is it pre-taped? And does that mean it's theater or does that mean it's film? Do you know what I mean? We're sort of in like this, and I think our goal at Live and in Color was trying to make it feel as live as we could. Like we weren't trying to make a film. We weren't trying to over edit things. We were really trying to give people as much of the experience you have in a theater. Not that there isn't anything wrong with a lot of editing and everything else, but specifically.
But then it's film, right? Like if you pre-record it and then you edit it, that's film.
The raw experience of theater is part of the reason you want to go to theater. It's to see
it's
the risk, it's the danger. So the live, you do have to, we tried to do the same thing where we tried to keep the live bits as live as possible, you know, as raw and, you know, unedited. But what Dev was saying about how it's changed kind of the behind the scenes, Spit and Bigger has always done, we put out open calls usually for our casting whenever we needed new people. And we always do a video open call, and we ask every single person who puts in to put in a video. So basically we just do a total open call. We don't look at resumes. We don't look at headshots ever. And the pandemic, one positive thing for us, I think it's like an equalizer, because I think sometimes resumes and headshots can, you know, indicate the kind of money you have or maybe the kind of connections. And if you just we want the raw talent, it's actually made people more willing to do a video audition, to put in it's made people more comfortable with that. So we can actually have a bigger swath of people coming in and have more access to people. So the accessibility has been great. In terms of Zoom theater, though, we've mined that pretty well during this past year. I don't know how much else we can really get from the Zoom theater, but I mean, I could be wrong. People have done very creative things.
I got to say, I really think that, you know, in grant applications in the near future, when you get to that section about discipline, you know, and you check off either performance or storytelling or photography or film video, I think there's going to be a category for virtual performance in the future, and it's going to go on, and people are going to apply for grants in that category. So I do think that, you know, more of this is going to happen, just because the audience reach is beyond the distance it takes someone to get from their home to your theater. And so I think that is going to go on. The thing that we liked that we did for our Jane's Walk piece is I had 6 actresses doing monologues with Jane Jacobs' wig and glasses. And so, you know, there was costume design. And we located each of the women giving the monologues outside of a building that is about to be destroyed because of the lack of landmarking or rezoning or something like that. So in the background, as these women are giving these monologues, you could see the building that is about to be torn down. So for us, it was still very site specific. It was still very live. Believe me, you could tell these women were out in front of these buildings live. So I do think, you know, that there are opportunities beyond just some sort of, you know, solid background behind the actors looking very two-dimensional. I mean, it's great for readings and for process stuff, but I do think there are a lot of opportunities for Zoom to be a little more creative.
Well, I think I We do a playwright series, international playwright series every year. So we were about to do it, the one for 2020, and we did it in May. 12 different directors, different casts. Each director decided to do something different with Zoom. What I saw then, and some were very creative, fantastic. Some were just plain reading. After 1 year, what I saw in 1 year slowly was really like people were really starting to use Zoom as a stage. It was not anymore, okay, let's do it because we don't have another way to do it. It was really, how can I use this medium to do something? How can I play with it? And I actually acted in a play where I memorized the script and I moved like I was on a stage in front of a camera on Zoom live, which was strange to me at the beginning when they told me. I was like, why are we doing that? And then while doing it, I was like, it's not such a bad idea. So I saw also, and I agree with Ralph and with everyone else, it's like, it will be used in a certain way. My big question is actually another one, is more technical if you want, is about the rules that actors have, with video. We find, I love working with any kind of actors, but I'm always, I have a big question mark. What do I do? Do I get an equity actor? Do I not get an equity actors? What if I want the thing to stay online? And what if I do something that now, when we'll talk about streaming theater, I want to put a performance that is something to me, for Laura, is something very important that should be resolved soon, because it's something that it's really stopping us. And I found it outrageous that we have to deal with that in 2021, going into 2022. I find it very unfair. I'm sorry, I have to say that.
Can I just say my solution to the union thing? Our film that we shot, it was actually chosen for a theater festival. It was going to be performed live. And we thought, well, why just do that? Let's just make a film and submit it that way. So we worked under a SAG contract. We paid the actors, we paid everybody else, whatever the highest actor got paid. So everybody got some money. And SAG has actually come out with an even better contract since we shot our film back in October. So if you want it to be something that goes on in the future, I find SAG is the better way to go, because they know how to deal with that stuff. But if you have an audience live, then equity is your choice.
But you know very well, because we were all together in many meetings, is not, sometimes you get, equity in the middle saying, no, that is theater. So it needs to be solved, this problem.
I think that problem with equity is kind of an extension of the problem for tiny producers, where it's like, when you have a very small budget, SAG has options where you can have a micro budget project. And equity has kind of kept this kind of, moneyed interest, kind of like that you need a huge budget or some kind of huge connection in order to even produce, and to hire their actors. You want to hire them and you want to pay them, but if you're going to make it impossible for small producers, it means that, like, you need only people with money can produce theater.
Well, I think the next topic I wanted to bring up might sort of touch on this a bit too, because it does involve like things potentially staying up. Laura, you were talking earlier about live streaming actual live stage productions, and I think like that's going to be another thing personally that's going to stick around, like, because I'm just going to give you a specific example. When theaters reopened on April 2nd, the Crane Theater, which I think all of us are familiar with, they produced a one-person show on the day theaters reopened. they had 33% capacity, but sold out those seats. And they had over 500 people watch the live stream. So it brought in a lot of ticket revenue for them. I'm wondering, like, is that something that you guys are going to be considering because of how much revenue it could boost for your companies and for your productions and so forth? So I'm wondering how you guys all feel about that.
If I might, because I'm very passionate about this, I'm going to go first.
Go ahead.
One of the things that I always talk, because I do international theater, I travel not only the States, but the world to do my theater. I'm international. It's beautiful.
You are?
I'm a very international. I'm being Italian is
I'm joking.
International. We are everywhere, as you can see from this panel. So I always said, there is a world outside. If we put things on video, if we record our performances, and that is another discussion that we are not going to do tonight, most likely, is we can have a lot of people and we can earn money. In Italy, you cannot talk about that because they think that is a crazy idea. But here, one thing I noticed, as you said, Anthony, is, I put my performance on video and a lot of people from outside of the US saw it, which to me is the first thing. If I do a performance, and I don't do it anymore, or I do it once in a while in 10 years, how beautiful is that I can show my work everywhere. I can show my actors, I can show my playwrights, I can show what I do. And how beautiful. During the pandemic, I saw performances from Russia, which I will never see. I mean, maybe one day if I go to Russia, but I saw performances from all over the places, even in languages that I had no idea, but I just saw them. And it was so beautiful and rewarding. And also you get ideas, you get feelings. It's so beautiful.
And we want as many people to see our work as possible, right?
Huh?
We want as many people to see our work as possible, right? So
yeah, and it should stay. And in Italy, our Minister of Cultural Affairs said that we need a Netflix for a cultural Netflix, like where you have, theater stuff. I don't know if we need a Netflix, but I think that this is a very important thing, and also it's a good revenue, thing, because we can really get, if you 500 people that they pay $1 in one night, yeah.
A cultural Netflix, I like that. What do you guys think of that?
Sorry, repeat what you said.
I was just saying a cultural Netflix. What do you guys think of that?
Well, I think what's interesting is I think this phenomenon of fear of taping or recording is a very American thing, because I feel like the British actually do tape a lot of their stuff, and they actually do have a lot of their channels where you can watch beautifully filmed live theater. And I think there's this very antiquated idea, especially with Broadway, that if we record it or we make a film of it, people won't buy a ticket or come to the live performance. And we've seen time and time again, that's not true. The more people see it, the more people want to come. So, I do think taping shows, live streaming shows is so beneficial for everyone, and for the longevity of theater. Yeah. So I'm all for like a theater channel of some sort where you can watch what you want I think the people who want to come to live theater are going to come.
It creates like an access that you have for people for international, like we have a lot of people who are international in our company, and also just, kids who can't really come to the theater. I mean, all those, kind of cheesy musical TV things that they do, like, Jesus Christ Superstar or whatever, like they're so amazing for kids who don't have a lot of access to theater in their communities. And it just kind of, produces this want or this desire for theater, and which is such a vital art form. It's such an interpersonal connection. And when it's live, it's like, the cream of the crop, it's the best, but you need to create that desire. And it's such a good way to you know, make it accessible to people who can't always access it.
And we sort of do have a Netflix for theater, Broadway HD.
Yeah.
And it's called Broadway HD, but it's not just Broadway.
We also have one called YouTube, the bootleg YouTube. So, you know.
I don't know how you guys are familiar, but I've seen some like independent and even community theater productions on a website called Broadway On Demand. I'm not sure how many of you guys are familiar with that, but that's a thing too. Anyway, go ahead. Wow. Sorry.
And so it is, and that started before the pandemic. So I think that the mindset is shifting a little bit in seeing the value of recorded live theater, and the things that most of the things on Broadway HD and Broadway On Demand are staged, are productions that had a run, like a staged run, and were just filmed. Unlike Jesus Christ Superstar and Hairspray, Peter Pan, those ones where they filmed it for like a one night, they actually made it for television. But it seems like the world is seeing the value in taking a piece that is a live stage run and filming it and making revenue from that and increasing accessibility of it.
Yeah, I think Actors Equity has always been a hard ass about these sorts of things. And, you know, maybe that's one thing about COVID that will be a positive, is that they have had to reflect and they are looking at what they're doing. You know, I know they don't want any videotape of their actor being embarrassed doing something, and they're very protective of their members that something's going to blow up and make tons and tons of money, but yet their union member won't get any percentage of that. So, you know, I can understand that they're very protective, but I do find it's going to be very interesting how we do go back to live performances again. I think it's going to be in fits and starts, and it's going to be in a lot of different ways. I've been using as one of my models Richard Burton's production of Hamlet. He shot it with 16 different cameras. It's in Wikipedia, Electrovision or something like that. And I know that, you know, the Crane has been doing some interesting stuff, and I look forward to more of their work. But also the Gene Frankel Theater has a show running right now. For $20, you can buy a ticket to see the show in person, and for $10, you can buy a ticket to see the show on Zoom. So I do think that we're going to start embedding cameras with live audiences in theaters, and the audience can choose whether they want to go out or whether they want to stay in and still see the same show.
The only thing is I hope that they start giving grants to record performances, to professionally record performances, because it's an additional cost.
Yeah, it's an extra, it's extra manpower, it's extra tech, it's a lot of pre-planning. And if you don't have a staff, that's, you know, harder.
And if you're in a small theater, we did record our shows at Cherry Lane in the studio. It was not easy because with the audience in it, it was, you know.
It also depends on the internet connection if you're doing it live too. A lot of theaters aren't planning for an internet connection, you know, or to have the kind of bandwidth that you need. It's a lot of preparation you need to have.
Yeah. I want to add one thing that I forgot. Ralph, I'm part of Theater Magazine in Italy, one of the most important one. I write for them, and they have an award every year. This year, they're thinking of adding the online theater award. They're talking about it.
Yeah, I think the Drama League, they have their awards coming up in the next week or two, and they've chosen the nominees are some really smart, sharp virtual performances. I look forward to see who wins their awards.
Okay, so before we move on from the topic of live streaming, I just want to clarify, like, by a show of hands, like, because each of you has your own company, by a show of hands, I want to ask, like, how many of you are definitively deciding that you're going to start streaming in addition to doing the actual live audience of your productions going forward? By a show of hands.
Repeat the question. Like, what are you asking specifically?
who's going to be live streaming their productions that are actually live on stage at the same time? Okay, so 2 people. Is there anyone who won't be?
Well, we hope to stream them after the production, just because we don't have the staff to do it at the same time. We wish we could, but during the production, we just, don't have the.
Fair enough. I mean, like, I was just trying to like gauge like what's the temperature on this topic amongst all of you for your own personal projects. But this is it's going to be interesting. I'm sorry, what?
The reason I'm not raising my hand is a lot of it depends on equity. Like with the Fresh Fruit Festival, we use, depending on the production, we use equity actors in some, and some use non-equity, but there's definitely a lot of equity actors in the productions. And currently, as things stand, we cannot afford to live stream these productions with equity actors.
Yeah.
So it's not that I don't want to, but we do not have the resources to do so.
Well, but I think that goes without saying. I mean, it's, if you can do it, you can. Casa Italiana, that is my background. We record everything we do, all the events, the first showing. But if we have an actor that is equity and doesn't feel like, we don't, we cut. I don't know, if we have a series of monologues, the actor that is equity doesn't appear in the final product. When we do the Italian Theatre Festival, if an Italian company say, no, I'm sorry, no, thank you. We don't put them, we don't stream and we don't put them on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, I'm noticing this is kind of a recurring topic amongst a lot of you, like working with equity actors and navigating that. Like, I don't know if any of you want to elaborate on specific experiences you've had over the past year while trying to do things virtually and trying to see, like, can we work with equity actors? And if so, like, what obstacles do we have to navigate? Like, I don't know if anyone wants to elaborate further on what's already been said. If not, we can move on. But
I can bring my own experience. We did something with the National Yiddish Theater. We were 9 companies doing It Can't Happen Here by Sinclair Lewis, and each company did 2 scenes in their original language. And because the National Yiddish Theater is equity, strongly equity, the reading was online only for 4 days. That was first of all, we had to pay the actors and the stage managers. We had to have 1 stage manager each company, and only 4 days. And then, that was the agreement with equity.
Dev, did I see your hand raised?
I was gonna say, like, we actually ended up dealing with the theater authority for most of our virtual stuff, but the rules were we could only leave the stream up for 3 days after it aired and then pull it down. And that's, I mean, it's right now everything is a mess with equity, and I think, as it's been said, they have a lot to figure out. So I hate to even address anything specific, because it seems to change daily and no one seems to know what the rules are at this point. I mean, I hope they figure it out, and I hope there is some sort of contract or contracts that allow us to do more of this stuff in a more reasonable way.
What changes, out of curiosity, and this goes for everyone, what sort of changes would you like to see made with regards to equity that would make it easier for all of you?
I think this is a whole nother show. But
no,
Back for that
like try, like, on specifically on this topic of virtual theater. I mean, like,
well, one thing is being able to have things up for longer. Both Laura and Dev were talking about those restrictions, like the time limit restrictions, and it's so small. Like with the audio plays that we're doing with Fresh Fruit, we decided we have to do it all non-equity because otherwise the radio play could only be up for 3 days. And we wanted to create a series that could be up for a year or so. And it was, the amount that we would have had to pay equity actors was astronomical and completely undoable. So as much as we wanted to use equity actors, we couldn't. So I think that something that has to change is more reasonable time constraints. I think that it's totally valid to have a limit, just like a run would have, like a showcase contract. You can have, I think, 12 performances. And that works well for a showcase contract. It's a 3-week run, 4 shows a week. That contract I've used a million times and it's great. I think that if we could have something similar to the showcase contract for virtual things, that would be very helpful.
Anyone want to add to that?
My very short answer is that they need to understand it 2021.
I would say, I'm a member of both SAG and Equity, and I love both of my unions. I appreciate being a union member, but as I've mentioned, my answer to this is a SAG contract, and just not, if you're going to record it and show it later, it's not live theater. So I wouldn't even bother going to Equity. But I've also audited the Off Broadway committee at Actors Equity for years. So I've seen the committee pass things that the attorneys just reject out of hand. So I don't, it's just a wall I'm not interested in trying to crack.
What do you mean for the attorney of the Equity?
Well, the Off Broadway committee will pass certain rules, and then they get sent up to the executive committee, who will have their lawyers review them. And then the lawyers will say, no, you can't do this, or no, you can't do that. And, so as much as the committee has tried to create these sorts of things we're talking about, the lawyers will not allow it.
And the reason is?
Because it might end up making money and the person won't get paid for it, or it might embarrass the actor and it will be on YouTube forever.
Why is it that SAG can have these kinds of contracts but Equity can't manage it?
Well, the main difference is that SAG does not have a live audience. So they're not worried about the live experience and protecting that in any way. They want you to shoot films, they want you to make films. And so they just, there's compensation written into their clauses if the films ever do make money, and that's good enough for SAG because, SAG's coffers, they make a lot more money from their members than Equity makes from their members. Equity runs on a shoestring budget.
You'd wonder why Equity didn't make it more accessible, the union. You'd think that they would make a little more money if they could make the union, the Equity, it seems impossible to get in. I'm not a member, so I don't know. But
contrary to what Laura is suggesting, apparently they don't realize it's 2021. And I do want to move on, though. I know this is a topic that a lot of you are passionate about, but I do have another topic I want to bring up. Just broadly speaking, like, obviously this has been a challenging year financially for a lot of venues and companies. Like, you look at Shetler Studios, you look at the Secret Theater, you look at all these different companies that have shut down. And I'm hoping if there are any other companies that shut down related to the pandemic, it'll be a very short one. I'm hoping none of them do. But I wanted to ask, if you could tell me what challenges, besides the ones we've already covered, that your companies may have gone through, or just you personally as an artist, and what challenges that you see continuing going forward, because there are going to be some restrictions that will still be in place for a while, as we talked about, whether it's through vaccine passports or a reduced capacity, mask mandates, etc. So I don't know who wants to go first on this, but
I'll just say, like, we were very lucky that we are still a smaller company. We're going into our 7th year, but we were going into our 6th year at the beginning of the pandemic, and we do not have our own venue. We don't have our own theater. So we, in many ways, were very lucky that we didn't have an office or space that we had that overhead for. So we were actually, thankfully, able to get through and also pivot and change what we did because we are still evolving and growing. So in many ways, one of our producers always says, I think COVID's one of the best things that happened to our theater, just in terms of being able to like think outside the box. That being said, we definitely had big plans for the year. We were supposed to take sort of a big leap with fundraising and what we produced, and we had to like backtrack completely. So, you know, basically we're sort of where we were at the beginning of the pandemic, and we're just going to sort of pick up from there. But the challenge always is, you know, especially with not-for-profit theater, is the money. Like where's the backing going to come from? And I think my concern, I hope that people come out in droves to support the theater financially. I don't know. It stresses me out daily running a not-for-profit, but you know, that's sort of the biggest hurdle, you know, the finances.
And in terms of grants, the Fresh Fruit Festival relies a lot on government grants. And there is now a lot less money and a lot more need in nonprofit theater for grants. So we are not getting as much grant money, and we anticipate for the next few years that what we've already always been able to count on from the government, we will not be able to count on financially. So that leaves us with a big gaping hole in our annual budget that we have to either slash programming or find another way to get the money, which would come from private donations. So my hope and what we're attempting to do is increase the percentage of funding that we get from donations, since the percent is being forced to decrease from what we can get from the government.
Mm. I'm assuming that's a running theme here, like finances and struggling with that.
I can sort of go off about what sort of annoys me. I feel like there's still a lot of relief funding out there. If you had a show canceled, you can get a grant. Well, just so happens when COVID hit, we were in a development phase. We had just finished our last major production. So we did not qualify for any of the funding over the past year. And, you know, I mean, if you had a show canceled that comes up this summer, boy, you were planning way far ahead. I think it's time the funders need to start, you know, looking forward instead of behind, and let's start funding the reopening. Let's start funding the new productions that people are trying to put together now. I know Art New York is still doing relief funding. I'd like to see them start coming up with some forward-thinking funding. I was very excited to see the City Parks Foundation has just started a grant for performing outdoors in open spaces and parks. And I'd like to see more of that kind of funding, so that we are sort of planning for the future.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you raised, Ralph, because there has been like grants and loans also specifically for companies or independent venues that have been struggling because of COVID. I'm curious to know, like, how many of you here, how many others here have actually struggled to actually get that funding, or have they even applied? Like, I'm curious, does anyone else have experiences with that here?
I got one, but I don't remember even from Art New York. I don't remember even
Art New York
name. Yes, I got one in November, I think. Yeah, no, I didn't. I actually, as Ralph was saying, I didn't qualify for many of those grants. So it was, and some of them I didn't get it, but most of them I didn't qualify. And Ralph is totally right.
Yeah, a lot of the funding is going to either commercial theater or big nonprofit theater. And I think that all of us smaller theaters have been left to fend for ourselves when we're the ones that have been the most vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes you can see the list of recipients and it's like, Okay.
I do want to just sort of come back to your question, Anthony, because, I'm still back on these roaches things. When the lights go back off again and the roaches start crawling back out into your kitchen, they're not all going to come back out. And, if some of the theaters close their doors and don't reopen, I prefer mergers and acquisitions. I wish they would bring on new faces to run the organization. But if it creates some space for new organizations to get some of this funding that they wouldn't otherwise get because so-and-so theater folded or so-and-so shut their doors, and it provides more diversity into our field because some of these younger people of color and variety start running some of these spaces and get funded. If every theater doesn't come back, it's not entirely a bad thing at this time.
But we're also talking about people like you guys who might be struggling to get funding. So that's why I'm bringing this up. So we have a panelist who's a person of color who's just started off this conversation with struggling with finances. So we also don't want to lose diverse voices that have just been getting started over the past decade or so, do we? So, but And
I was at Ralph, I think you were as well at the art workers rally. And I don't remember who said from the podium said, you're giving money to Broadway or a business, but there is also off Broadway. And I did a post the other day on Facebook because everyone was like, oh, Broadway is reopening. Finally, we can go back to the theater. And I said, okay, I'm very happy that Broadway is reopening, but do you know that there are theaters already open that you can go and see a show in? There is a lot of going on. And I got, I think almost for now, almost 100 people and reaction. And I was like, see, there are people there that they agree that there are also the off-Broadway world, which is always thought of as the cradle of theater civilization. Oh, off of Broadway, everything is everything because it's the creative space. Yeah, but give money to off of Broadway and give it in a way that we can all apply and get something. Because, there are, I don't want to name names, but there are some grants that is impossible.
Right.
There's also a lot of grants.
Being more than I would be to some of these people, Laura, because I've met way too many people who don't realize that theater in New York is more than just Hamilton. Anyway, I'm sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to go off on the grant. Yeah, because the grants, we were able to receive a grant early on in the pandemic, a couple grants early on in the pandemic, because we did actually, it's really chances. We literally had 2 shows closed. So, if we didn't have 2 shows planned, we wouldn't have qualified. But we were, and then they kind of dried up, we apply, but, other, sometimes larger companies are getting them. And a lot of the grants, even, you need a matching donor or something like that too, which is also sometimes frustrating, that's okay, so you just kind of need to, you understand the concept, but it's also, shutting out some people, shutting out companies that don't have connections.
And the gatekeeping of just how complicated grants are, that weeds out so many small companies anyway who don't have a development person full-time on staff who can wade through all of that and know what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Laura, did you have something extra you want to say? You look like you want to say something extra.
No, I agree, and I feel for it. At the Art Workers, Orietta Crispino, the director of Theater Lab, I don't know if you heard it, Ralph, but she was saying, I have a space, and even for me, some grants are impossible because I don't qualify. But I have a space, and I have a season, and I'm paying rent. And if I don't qualify, think of another company that doesn't have a space. It's it's really, as everyone said, it really, if something has to change, is to look at the independent world. What is the name of this podcast or this meeting?
The podcast, is that what you asked me?
Yeah, what is the name?
Name of the podcast, thank you.
Huh?
Indie Art Today. For our listeners who forgot the name of our
She means she's like emphasizing.
No,
like,
I'm saying that indie.
For our listeners who forgot,
Indie, no? Is indie, independent. So,
yeah.
And that is, you know, indie needs to be supported more.
Absolutely.
The indie world.
That's why I did the podcast. Thank you. But anyway, does anyone else have something to contribute more to this topic before we move on? Okay. Well, on that note, I did want to wrap up this by leaving on a positive note. We've talked a lot tonight about the challenges we face, the obstacles we face as artists. I was hoping I could hear from each of you individually about what makes you optimistic about the future as we're hopefully in the final stages of this pandemic and as theaters start to reopen. I want to go in reverse order of the introduction. So Dennis, if you could go first.
Sure. Well, I am very optimistic for things have been shaken up because of this. I mean, in the whole world, no matter what industry you're in, no matter who you are, you have had to reevaluate everything. You've had to think about who you are, what you do in the world. Like, you've had to think about the world. So it's been a really, really amazing, otherwise impossible thing where the whole world had to stop and think about what we were doing. So it has created all of this discussion and thought and all of that probably wouldn't have happened otherwise. So I'm optimistic that we're going to come into a world that is a totally reimagined, more inclusive, more diverse, more creative world that if the pandemic didn't happen, we would have just been still barreling along on that same train as before with slow incremental changes. Whereas this sort of like cracked the whole thing open. And I think there's going to be, I'm really excited to see what the next 10 years of theater becomes. And I really hope it doesn't just fall back into what it was before. And I'm optimistic that it won't.
Dev?
Yeah, I completely agree with Dennis. I echo very much a lot of what he's saying. I love, Ralph, I use the cockroach analogy often. I do use it in reference to New Yorkers and artists that I feel like we are cockroaches. We will survive like the worst catastrophe. We will be there. Artists will be there. I think, you know, if we're going to be completely New York centric, you know, we are, we've survived a lot of things, you know, the AIDS epidemic, the 9/11, like the city has bounced back and the arts have bounced back. And I think I'm excited to see, as Dennis said, what happens in the next 10 years. I think it's going to be a whole new thing.
Ralph?
You know, yeah, let me second what Dennis said and also what Dev said. I think, you know, what makes me sort of hopeful, there are a couple of things. One specifically is an organization called Culture Hub. They are in residence at La Mama, and they are developing this software called Live Lab. I think Dev would like this. It's peer-to-peer, so actually the two singing voices can come together before going out to the servers, so you do away with latency and buffering. And I feel for singers and musicians because this has been harder on on them than any other discipline. But Culture Hub, they are doing some incredible things. I also have been taking workshops at the USITT, which is the Technical Theater Guild. And some of these projection designers, they've been writing code all winter, and they're working on other software packages that I think are going to make for more and better virtual performance. I haven't used OBS Studio yet, but I'm really excited about that as a software way that we can live edit shows for virtual performance. So I do think that there are technical steps and other sorts of virtual performance tools that are going to be coming online over the summer and into the fall that I think are going to create a whole new discipline. Not that I am not happy to get back to live performance as well. So, but there's some organizations out there that are really worth cheering on.
Laura?
I am hopeful and very positive about the fact that theater has become, during the pandemic, a global activity. So we don't think anymore about doing something only in New York or only in Rome or only in another city, but we really connect and we become international. And I really love that, because I really believe, we talk always about globalization and most of the time in a negative, there is a negative connotation of this word, but I think that globalization or being international, whatever you want to call it, is a beautiful thing, and it's going to make us connecting more and collaborating more with the world, with the technology that is coming, yay, it's very possible. So that is my positive side of everything that happened.
And Sarah, take us home.
Oh, okay. I think that, kind of what Laura was saying, that I hope the technology kind of helps us rediscover what we loved about theater in the first place. I think before the pandemic, we were all kind of getting a little bit, we were using our phones and technology as kind of a crutch. And I'm hoping that the kind of exhaustion that came from the pandemic and, always seeing everything through a screen will kind of underline what we love about live theater or live performance in general, because it's such a unique art form among all the art forms, in that it's got that human connection and the human vulnerability and human flaws that get edited away with film or get written out of novels and get painted out of artwork. So I'm hoping that we can kind of rediscover what we love about being in a room, in a dark room with other people, and then also just emphasize that internationally across the United States. Can we, kind of reverberate that feeling and have other people experience it and want to experience it? So hopefully, I think theater is uniquely positioned to be the art form that explodes in this time of that we're so desperate for human contact and we're so desperate to be in a room with other people. So hopefully theater it's like a forest fire, that it was, horrific and violent, but then at the end of it, new growth can come out of it.
Absolutely. And I just want to end by saying that I couldn't find a single thing that you guys just said that I think that I disagree with. I think there's plenty of reason to be hopeful. There's plenty about the next decade and beyond of theater that's going to be fascinating to watch. But for now, I just want to say thank you to all five of you for being on this panel. And for those of you who may be listening on the audio only version, this video that we live streamed on YouTube will be up for people to watch. So please go and watch our pretty faces talk about this rather than just listen to the audio version. So just thought you should all know that. Also, remember, you can find this podcast on social media at Indie Art Today if you weren't following us already. Next week, we are going to have a panel of actors on video and on audio for you to watch. So please stay tuned for that and for future episodes of our podcast. Until then, I want to thank all 5 of our panelists for being here this week. And until next week, as I always like to say, I'm Anthony Piccioni.